I will struggle through this. I'm a victim of, along with many other people, of the flu and cold that's been going around, so my voice is not very strong, but that'll be to your advantage to keep my presentation short anyway. But bear with me if I struggle a little bit with the voice. I want to talk to you a little bit in a more general sense to provide some background for further discussion this afternoon. We heard lots of specific presentations about agriculture and urban situation and climate change, lots of specific discussions about climate change. I will talk a little bit specific, but also general. I want to talk specifically about forestry situation. I work in forestry, but also the presentation on the drivers. I want to tie this in because I think it has implications for everybody here. And technology challenged. I think it's on. So first of all, talk a little bit about the situation with forests in the region and drivers of change, and then at the end a little bit about some of the FAO programs addressing this, just for information's sake. Globally, we can see the situation with forests, about 4 billion hectares, a third of the global land area, and also, as we know, continuing difficulties and challenges of converting forest land. About 13 million hectares being converted annually. In the Greater Mekong subregion, here's from the Forest Resource Assessment figures of 2010, and less than a year from now we'll be releasing 2015 fraud data, so this will change a little bit. But you can see in the Greater Mekong, about half of the land area still covered with forests. More in some countries, less in others, but roughly half. But as we also know, the people tracking forests, very little of this forest remaining that is relatively untouched by human impacts. There's no such thing as forest that's not touched at all, but we categorize primary forests as those that have been relatively unaffected by human intervention. Only 13% roughly in the Greater Mekong subregion, which is well below the region totals or averages, and as well as globally. What we do have is lots of what is categorized in the Forest Resource Assessment as naturally regenerating forests. These are forests that have been disturbed by humans in one stage or another, regenerating naturally. And in this category, this includes, unfortunately, in the Mekong, a lot of quite heavily degraded forests. And we can see that the categories here is much higher than region and global averages. We also have quite a lot of planted forests. We heard about plantations yesterday and today. In Mekong, this is growing, this area, about 10% of all the forests. And this is more than the world's average around the globe, but less than the overall average in Asia-Pacific region. So, forest resources. We can see, in general, China is one of the countries that's increasing forest area, mostly, almost entirely planted forests. Vietnam also increasing a bit, but most of the rest of the countries in the sub-region are losing forests and fairly significantly. Thailand essentially holding its own, but we can see difficulties in the other countries. This only goes up to 27, but you can see that wood production dominated by China, but overall has leveled off and is in decline. And if we carry this out to the present years, we'll see that decline in wood production is continued downward. as resources are depleted and the increasing sourcing wood from outside the subregion. So just some of the key trends. In most countries, deforestation and certainly degradation of forests are continuing and continuing concern. Wood products production declining in most countries. Plantations continuing to expand. We see considerable forest health problems as a result of fragmentation and exploitation, exacerbated by some of the climate change impacts. No doubt we're seeing much greater international interest in forests, largely I would say driven by the connection between forests and climate change. We see that in Vietnam and perhaps in Thailand and in China, we've reached this point of what we call forest transitions, where we're moving from a low point in forest cover at least to a slightly upward trend in forest area. In China, in fact, the situation quite dramatic. We often talk about Asia-Pacific region, and we kind of trumpet the success of the region in increasing forest cover, but essentially it's all China that has offset the losses in many of the other countries with its very aggressive plantation program. This slide quite interesting. We talk about national policies and national programs. So these are the stated targets for countries in the greater Mekong with regard to forest cover. And we can just see, if you're not color inhibited like me, you can probably see the colors red and green, at least the upward arrows, the direction that countries are moving with regard to meeting or achieving their forest cover targets. Here's some more colors for you. I'm sure no one will be able to read the detail of this, and I don't intend you to. This is an exercise that we have done based on many different factors that are in forest resources assessment to try to track the trends in different countries. So the green is an annual increase of more than a 0.5%, and the yellow is roughly holding its own, and red going the other direction. So what's important here, and people sometimes get very excited about one particular category or one number, but what's important is to look at the overall trends. If you see those countries that have a bit more green, we can take some satisfaction perhaps that things are on the right track. Those countries that are struggling with a lot of red maybe should be looking more carefully at what's happening. Now I want to just talk some about the drivers of change, and in a very general way. These are presented with regard to what impacts they might have with respect to forests, but I would contend that this has a lot of implications for land use in general, as well as climate change factors and rural development. And you'll see I don't have climate change listed up here at all. And I would refer to Maine's presentation this morning. That when we talk about local decisions on land use and farmers' decision making, climate change doesn't come very high up on that list. It might, he said, 5 or 6 or 7 down the list. I grew up on a farm, and I'm pretty sure that if you had asked me when I was engaged in farming, or my father, it wouldn't even be in the top 10. I think there are many other factors that come into decision making. The important thing, which then translates down to local actions, is if in the overall macro policy arena, the world sees climate change as very important, which it does. How do we translate that into policies and initiatives at the local level that then do influence these factors? And they can have influence with regard to these other drivers as well. So first of all, economic development. And here, this is quite an interesting chart. We see the increase in GDP, tremendous growth. In many respects, we're a victim of our own success. We have done a tremendous job in many countries in the Mekong and in Asia Pacific in eliminating or reducing poverty. We have this massive boom of the middle class. We should really be celebrating the success of this. This is what we want in development, but it has the flip side. All these people moving into the middle class also want cars, and they want TVs, and they want a nice apartment or a condo, and they want air conditioning and all these other things. I was struck by the photos and the presentation yesterday of the piles of all the belongings out in front of people's houses. And our presenter said, people can be happy without these things. Yes, I think people can be happy without those things. People can be happy with those things too, and they will be more comfortable with those things. There's a reason that people want those things. Many times we want things we don't really need. So from the standpoint of education and the standpoint of informing people of the environmental impact, that's great. But we can be quite assured that as people move into middle class and have purchasing power, they will continue to demand many of these things. So this obviously has implications for forests and natural resources. People want more furniture, they want more paper, they want more forest products in general. And where do they come from? How do we produce them? Infrastructure development. Tremendous boom in road network. We heard discussions about high-speed rail. It's in the news every day here in the Greater Mekong subregion. Certainly we know very well that this has tremendous impacts on forests when we give access. It also has tremendous positive impacts for local people in terms of being able to access markets, get products to market, earn more income, be more mobile. So these things, like most of these drivers, they have both positive and negative implications. To me, the demographic drivers are some of the very most interesting because they're so complex when it comes to land use and natural resource management, forestry. Everybody always talks about increasing population. Yes, we have population increase. It will continue to increase for several decades in most countries in the region, but it's a lot more complicated than that. I was struck by how many presenters talked about the aging issue in the rural areas. Aging farmers, that there are fewer farmers in many areas. In general, we have increases in population in most rural areas, but at a much slower rate than the urban population. We have lots of people moving to the cities, driven there by job opportunities, more exciting life perhaps perceived. So what does that mean for natural resource management? What does it mean for pressures on forests? In some areas, we see a lessening of the pressure on forests as a result of this. Migration. We talk about ASEAN economic community integration picking up pace next year. We already see in many countries, in many places, tremendous impacts of migration with regard to what people remain in the rural areas. I also saw one of the presentations this morning talking about rice, and I was really struck by the figure of how much money the families that had been surveyed were getting from remittances, more than they were earning from the rice. So here in Thailand. And we can see this story over and over again. Lots of people are attracted by jobs elsewhere. That has major social implications, but it also has major implications on natural resources. I can point to many areas in, not in Mekong, but in Philippines, some here in Thailand, where this has affected because of labor shortages then. It's actually a positive thing with regard to forestry because forests usually require less labor inputs than more intensive agricultural production. So how do these drivers, this complex arena of demographic drivers affect us? Agricultural expansion. This is the big threat usually to forests in most places. We can see that agricultural expansion has not only continuing but actually accelerating in many of the Mekong countries with regard to clearing of forests for more agriculture. The only country in the last decade or so that is seeing a decline in agricultural land has been Thailand, of the Mekong countries. FAO estimates that the world will need to produce at least 60% more food than it currently is producing by the year 2050 in order to meet demand. So where is that going to come from? Historically, it's always come from clearing more forests. But we need to focus a lot more. This is really where ECRAF and FAO come together on many things, how we can produce more food from the same area of land, how we can produce more food from more complex production systems, how we can maybe change consumption habits in some cases, the whole package of issues for meeting this demand, including currently underutilized food resources. Governance. We haven't heard too much talk about that here in this meeting, but this is a very important issue. Very interesting. Just at lunchtime, if anybody had a look at today's Bangkok Post, the new figures are out for the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. And good news, I guess, for Thailand. Thailand moved from 102 ranking to 85. So we should all be cheering that and hope that trend continues. I didn't see any figures yet for the other countries here, although China is not listed here. China was reported to have gone the other direction. So let's see what happens with some of these other rankings. But don't attack me as the messenger of this table. You can attack Transparency International if you don't like it, and those they interviewed to get their perceptions. But this is a huge problem that we all should recognize in the countries here and around the world. And this has big implications. It's not just the idea of corruption, but what does it mean in terms of rights and benefits for people? And we think about governance. We need to be thinking about land tenure, resource access and tenure. We need to be talking about the rights of indigenous people and local people, especially when we're thinking about timber concessions and economic land concessions, these sorts of things. It encompasses the whole arena of dealing with illegal logging and illegal trade in forest and natural resource products. It has to do with, on the positive side, with how well governments deliver extension services, how well they support rural development, and as well how they deal with the issues to help in sustainable rural development. So this is also an interesting area for, I think, all of these tied together with regard to you as researchers, some of us in other organizations that are more on the delivery side, capacity development, and training, and policy development. So here I just list some of the things that FAO is actively pursuing in the region. First of all, some of the things related to the resource monitoring and inventory. Some of you very familiar with the Forest Resource Assessment. But one of the great positive developments early on with regard to all of the attention on forests with respect to climate change is that a lot of investment has gone into forest monitoring and inventory. So we have active programs in most countries now in the region to strengthen those aspects with regard to forest management. And it's fairly safe to say we know now more about the forest resource base and the characteristics of the forest than we ever have before. And I see that this will continue as well. I mentioned about governance. Forest Law Enforcement and Governance and Trade Program is active in Thailand and Vietnam. We have programmed, we're working on, together with USAID LEAF, on further analysis of these drivers of change, both positive and negative for forests. We are trying to make a big push with regard to forest restoration, which is, I referred to all of the degraded forest areas in the region needing attention. Certainly more attention on involvement of people and participatory processes. Forest tenure, major area of importance. We're working very closely with RECOFT in this area to strengthen this both on the policy side as well as strengthening capacity. We're trying through the Forest and Farm Facility and various projects to strengthen the hand of communities with regard to forest harvesting and benefits coming from community forests there. Bioenergy has lots of implications for the climate change area, implications for agriculture, implications for climate change certainly, and food production. So we have a very strong program related to the implications and linkages between bioenergy and climate change. And I mentioned the need we will have to pursue with regard to underutilized foods, strengthening, general areas of policy and institutions, capacity building, financing, and then our usual response to countries as they ask us for help on specific issues. So I think with this very brief introduction, what I would hope is that this helps to stimulate some of the discussion about future research needs. We as an organization that helps countries with the development aspect and capacity building, we're very dependent on the research community to help provide us with the sound foundation for working and moving forward. And to me, it's very important also that we look at all of these issues and their linkages, how they fit together. That's the main purpose of what I would like to leave you with. Thank you.